May Allah bless and keep you safe, keep you safe. May Allah bless and keep you safe.
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Anbiya'i wal Mursaleen. Amma ba'd fa'a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. As-salatu wassalamu alayka ya Nabiy Allah wa ala alika wa ashabika ya Nur Allah. My dear respected viewers of Madani Channel, Alhamdulillah, we are once again welcoming you in our silsila called Secrets of Health. In this program, we talk about benefits of health and those tips that help us to live a healthy lifestyle. Dear viewers of Madani Channel, be with us from start till end, inshallah. Today our topic is fasting and liver. Inshallah, a beautiful information and we'll be sharing with you. But before we proceed towards our topic, let's make few good intentions, because it is a saying of my beloved Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, Niyyatul mu'mini khayrun min amalihi. Intention of a believer is better than his actions. My Shaykh Tariqat, founder of Dawat Islami, founder of Madani Channel, has given us a beautiful mindset to make good intentions before performing any good deed or any permissible task. So this program, we have got a very foremost intention, that is for the pleasure of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. At the same time, we have got this intention to bring awareness. When we will have awareness about our health, we can look after our health better, and then inshaAllah Azza wa Jal we can worship Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. My Shaykh Tariqat Amir of Ahl Sunnah, actually when he eats food, he makes this intention: whatever power I will gain from this food, whatever energy I'll gain from this food, I will utilize that in the worship of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. Subhanallah. The pious people, the friends of Allah, they've got this mentality. If they sleep, they make this intention that I'm going to sleep in order to relax my body. And intention is, when I'll get up, I'll worship Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. When they rest, they have got this intention that I am relaxing my body, because when I'll get energy, I'll use that in the worship of Allah. When they eat, they make this intention: I'm eating in order to give energy to my body, so I can utilize that for the ibadat of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. Dear viewers of Madani Channel, intentions are very important, and Alhamdulillah, it multiply our good deeds. Yes, the more intentions one makes, the higher the reward he attains. Let's go to our honorable guest, Dr. Muhammad Khurram Nithar Attari, who is also a consultant and practicing in one of the UK's university hospitals. So inshallah Azza wa Jal, we'll go to him and talk about fasting and liver. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Awesome. How are you doing? MashaAllah. Once again, we welcome you in this program, and we thank you that you have given us your precious time once again. Doctor, the topic today we have selected, that is liver and its relationship with fasting. First of all, I would like you to please explain us what is liver and what is its function, and then we'll take it from there. What sort of diseases are linked with it, and what sort of symptoms one can face, and then inshallah further we'll go towards the fasting and how it improves the health of our liver.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So liver is again considered one of the vital organs in the body.
It is.
And this is located on the right side of our upper abdomen, just under the rib cage. And the liver, it has one of those organs which has a regeneration potential. So one of the very few organs like skin, where if it is damaged, it can regenerate to an extent. The other key thing to say about this is that liver is distributed in several lobes. So these are different parts of the liver, different lobes which have overall a very similar function, but there are some small differences. And in terms of functions of liver, The beauty of this organ is that researchers have enlisted nearly 500 different functions of the liver. And they range from things like detoxifying the injurious materials which are created, poisons which are created through the metabolism of food. It also has a very crucial role of synthesizing complex proteins. So one of those are clotting factors. So whenever we bleed and the blood has to stop, that incumbent upon the formation of a clot.
So it means this blessing is also because of liver.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, if bleeding starts and doesn't stop, then a person can bleed to death.
Exactly. They can exsanguinate because of the hypovolemic shock. Absolutely. And then another key function of the liver is that it is a storage organ. So it is a great store because it has this ability to flex in order to be able to store large amounts, and that becomes very relevant, as we'll discuss later, for fasting. And another key function of the liver is the processing or the digestion of fats, which no other organ is able to do as liver does, making it readily accessible for us. So I've just listed few of, as I said, nearly 500 functions of the liver. And another thing which is, I guess most of our viewers would like to know, is that there is another little organ which sits underneath the liver, and that is called gall bladder. So gall bladder is an organ which stores bile. And bile is the substance which helps in the metabolism of fats. So this is something where people can get inflammation of this gallbladder, and it's not uncommon where we would hear about people having operation to have their gallbladder taken out and it is removed. So all of those is related to its function around storage of fats, processing of fat, and how it would communicate with the intestines to be able to do that.
Now, so when we talk about liver, so there are certain diseases that are linked with liver, and liver gets affected by them, especially, which is very common especially in developing countries. You can talk about hepatitis, A, B, C. You see, could you please shed a bit of light on them, and what sort of hepatitis is, especially in the UK and western part of the world?
So, as we have discussed right in the beginning, that whenever the word itis comes, or the suffix itis comes, that means inflammation. So the word hepatitis means inflammation of the liver. So, so one of the things which inflammation can be acute. So this is acute hepatitis. And that tends to be if it is viral hepatitis. So the hepatitis can happen due to various things. It can be related to infections like viral hepatitis, A, B, C, D, E, we will discuss. Second is it can happen due to medications. So especially therapeutic misadventures with medication, or even deliberate overdoses with medicines can have that effect on liver. And the third thing is that different toxins can also have, because the liver is the place where it will try and detoxify. So if the toxin overload overcomes those barriers, then it is at risk of causing hepatitis. So coming back to the topic, particularly about viral hepatitis, which I guess is a lot more common, certainly in Eastern world. In Western world, it is relatively common as well, but for different reasons. Exactly. So viral hepatitis, so there are acute hepatitis, which would happen for days to a week or a couple of weeks, and then it would settle down. And as we know, with most viral infections, they would, when they do, like our sore throat or runny nose, those infections, they settle down themselves. So same is the case here, and that is hepatitis A, which can settle down itself. It's very rare for it to be life-threatening, perhaps in about 1 to 1.5% of people. Generally speaking, it will usually settle down itself. So that's hepatitis A. Hepatitis E is very similar. However, if it happens in a pregnant woman, that's when we are most concerned about it, because that's where the mortality is very high. But thankfully, again, it's uncommon. So we are really in the realm of chronic hepatitis, which is mainly related to the viruses B and C. Now, this up to a year or 18 months ago, we were really concerned about them because we didn't really have curative treatment for it. So now we have, we don't like to use the word cure because that's quite a heavy word to use in this context. But what the term which we use now is that the medication is so effective that we achieve what we call SVR, sustained virological response, which basically means that there is no virus which is detectable anymore because the treatment has got rid of that virus. Now, the hepatitis virus is very clever. It can hide in the system for months or years, and then it can rear its ugly head. So that's why we have used this term SVR rather than saying cure, but we are achieving cure rates or this SVR rates of well over 95%. So the symptoms which most people in acute hepatitis, the key thing would be jaundice. So they're turning yellow. So in the eyes, between the sclerae, the white portion of the eye called sclerae, that's where it tends to be obvious first, and then it can cause discoloration or the yellowish discoloration of the whole skin. So that is because of a pigment which is deposited in skin and in our eyes, and that is the bilirubin. So this is one of the pigments which would give this yellowish discoloration. So that would be the first one of the things which people would notice. And the other symptoms would be very similar to what we will call constitutional symptoms. So anybody who is unwell, so they may lose their appetite, they may lose a bit of weight, they could get vomiting, nausea, where they've got feeling sick. So those sort of constitutional symptoms can happen. Fever can happen with that. So that is related to the acute hepatitis.
What about contraction of
Exactly.
liver?
So when it is chronic, untreated, uncontrolled hepatitis, what it's actually doing is it is causing permanent inflammation of the liver. And as a result, because of the destruction of architecture of the liver, the liver would start shrinking in size. And when it would shrink to an extent, we would then call it cirrhosis. So cirrhosis is the term which is basically scarring and the shrinkage of the liver. Now, when that happens, then that carries a huge morbidity, because
Is it severe?
so it is severe, and it carries a lot of health issues. Because a shrunken liver, all the functions which I mentioned, it would not be able to do any of those.
500 function it does.
Exactly. So it has got nearly 500 functions. So obviously it wouldn't be able to detoxify anything. So the risk is that anything it will try and detoxify, people can get into a state of stupor where they're confused, they're disoriented, they're dizzy. This is something we call hepatic encephalopathy. And that's because the ammonia levels, they rise so high because the liver was not able to get rid of that toxin, the ammonia. If it happens if we look at the proteins which it makes, so the inflammatory protein levels go high, so it will cause a state of continuous inflammation. The immune system will be knocked down, so that risk of catching other infections. The blood will get thinner because the clotting factors which it was making is not able to make anymore, so the blood gets thinner, so that means the risk of bleeding is higher. And then we run into issues where when it reaches to the point that it is not able to hold that protein inside, that protein then leaks out. And with that protein, as it leaks out, a lot of water accumulates in those places. And then we will start getting what we call ascites, which is fluid accumulation in the liver lining, in the lining of the abdomen or tummy. And then that can start accumulating in the legs, and then can have a knock-on effect on the heart. So you can see that it's a gradual multi-organ deterioration, which has all happened as a result of liver. And what we're most concerned about is liver cancer. So that can be a complication of
So how could you
uncontrolled
describe cancer in liver?
So the liver cancer is where generally it would happen related to these conditions. So usually in the context of chronic hepatitis. So this is where in such people there is a regular monitoring which happens with one particular blood test called alpha fetoprotein, and also an ultrasound of the liver which happens every 6 months. So 6 monthly blood tests. So it is basically requires active surveillance because we don't know when the liver cancer may appear. Sometimes it can take up to 20 or 25 years to develop. So it really needs that proactive surveillance and monitoring, and the vigilance is required exactly to be able to identify. But the symptoms of liver cancer in the beginning are very similar to what I've described. And by the time the other symptoms appear, which are of this severe weight loss, this severe loss of appetite, and the liver signs of liver failure, by that time it has really gone beyond that point of reversibility. And that's where there is very little which we are able to offer. So really what we need to do is hepatitis. First of all, the hepatitis vaccination is quite important, which is now offered routinely to children. At the moment, it's only available for hepatitis B, not for hepatitis C. So that's where the precautionary measures are important. So that is ensuring that there is no mixing of blood or blood products. So properly screened blood is used, if ever, for blood transfusion. The issues about the hairdressers and barbers using used razor blades, that is one of the problems. And then there's also issue of vertical transmission, where mom can pass it to children, or it can transmit between couples. So those are the sort of things which can lead to hepatitis. So that's where the precautionary measures are very important, as well as getting tested for it, especially if any of those symptoms are there, and also making sure that if someone is diagnosed, there is very good treatment available, to contact the doctor to get the treatment. Usually it will be through a hepatologist, and also to have participant active surveillance.
Also, you've discussed in detail about the symptoms and how does it function and what is the importance. It's really a thought-provoking information you have provided, mashallah. And I would like to just request you to shed light on those preventions. One, like for example, now we as Madani Channel would be thinking it's very important organ, 500 functions it's carrying out. On top of that, there are so many important functions it's doing. If it stops working or it gets shrinked, it's going to be a disaster, or it, Allah forbid, if it's cancer, then definitely it's a life-threatening at the same time. So the reason I'm asking this question is we should know that what measures one should take for the health of liver itself. What should be done, and what food is required in this sense, or whatever you would like to explain in this.
So one thing which is very important is that for the liver to function to its utmost and to optimize its function, we need to reduce the load on the liver. Okay. So as I mentioned, this is a storage point for glucose, and it stores that in a complex form called glycogen. And then it's also a form for fat storage as well, and the fat processing. So the more fat we eat, the more sugars we take, all of that puts extra pressure on the liver to try and process them. So that's where, again, the lifestyle modification is hugely important. So the avoidance of fat, certainly the saturated fats, the avoidance of sugars, so what we've talked about. The second thing is alcohol. So in Western world, one of the key issues with chronic liver disease, the main issue is alcohol. So that's what is causing alcoholic cirrhosis. In some people, it will cause alcoholic hepatitis. We've discussed in one of the previous episodes that alcohol can also cause pancreatitis. So again, when there is pancreatitis, that is affecting the insulin levels. So there is that indirect relationship between glucose storage, which happens in the liver, and the insulin which needs to be secreted from pancreas. So alcohol will affect both. So certainly, as I guess our religious teaching is the abstention of alcohol. Yeah. So that's quite important. And then obviously in order to avoid the scenarios where one can contract this viral hepatitis. So that's important. Another thing which is quite relevant is that we know that about 2/3 of obese people will have this condition called a non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So the fat levels have reached to that extent that the liver is just about coping with the storage of those fats. And what it's causing is fatty liver disease. So it's a state of inflammation of the liver where they get what we call transaminitis. So one of the liver function tests, very commonly done, is something called ALT and AST. So these are the two common
If you
liver
go to your
tests.
GP, you can request that.
Well, obviously GP will assess to see whether one needs that. They will take the history and all of that. But these will be the tests which somebody who's known to have liver disease will certainly, it will be considered. So it is important to have that. And then also in terms of lifestyle modification, we talked about cholesterol levels, and that some people would be suggested to take statins. We know that statins, which is one of the medications which we use for reducing cholesterol levels, that will have a positive impact on the liver. So I think ensuring that all those precautionary measures are taken, ensuring active monitoring happens, and contacting the healthcare professionals if there is a suspicion of liver disease would be the key to treatment.
Doctor, we have, mashallah, covered this topic quite beautifully and in detail. Now, let's talk about fasting, as this is our topic, that how fasting has got its impact on our liver health.
So that has been one of the key areas where there's been a lot of research on the healthy impact of fasting on the liver. So two of those things, I guess, with our previous discussion would be quite apparent now to our regular attendees, because we have been discussing these topics again and again. So one, I mentioned about that the storage element. So we know that with fasting, what we are actually helping is in the states of when we are not fasting, most of that glucose is being produced in the liver in the process called gluconeogenesis. And also the glucose is being stored in the form of glycogen, which is sort of a complex structure which keeps the glucose stored, and that is called glycogenolysis. So what's happening in fasting is that the complete reverse of this happens. This is where we have a process called glycogenolysis. So actually the glycogen starts breaking down. So when the liver doesn't receive any sugar in the bloodstream because we're not eating, the body needs to maintain that blood sugar level. So the message goes to the liver that we need glucose. Let's mobilize your stores and use that. So a great way to actually give an opportunity for the liver to get rid of all these extra stores of glucose through this process of glycogenolysis. So fasting has a great positive impact on that. The second thing it will do is it will help mobilize fat stores. So in the first instance, the liver will mobilize its glucose stores because that's a readily accessible energy currency. But then the next step is that we are continuing with the month of Ramadan. It's reaching mid-Ramadan. We have been fasting, alhamdulillah, regularly. And then it reaches the point where it has to now start mobilizing the fat stores. So when the fat is metabolized, some of that will be converted into sugars to provide this ready source of energy, and the other would be converted into fatty acids. So these are the fatty acids which sometimes we would be able to feel in the breath of someone who is fasting, especially after Asr time, when we're really reaching right the crucial moment. And that is that smell which is actually the smell of fatty acid.
More than the mushk.
Subhanallah, exactly. So again, that again beautifully describes how Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala has kept it so natural, that this is a natural process of someone being healthy, that the fat stores are being mobilized by fasting, the fatty acids are being released, and those are coming in the smell. And so that it doesn't put people off, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala has granted us that, that his happiness, that if you smell like that, that means, the fast is really working. So people...
You're doing it for me.
And we're doing it for Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, exactly. And this is exactly what happens in keto diets. So there has been a fad of keto diets. So that's exactly what happens, is that they create this stage of ketosis. And by doing that, they get a lot of this smell, of acetone smell in the breath. And that is happening as a result of keto diet. But the beauty of our fast of Ramadan is that in addition to all the other benefits which we've been discussing, partly some of that it will help break down. So not to the extent of keto diet where it can be potentially dangerous, and there have been instances where it's been life-threatening to people. But intermittent fasting of Ramadan does it in such a beautiful way that there is no risk for a healthy person, there is no risk to their life, but it also achieves the mobilization of fat stores. So that's the second benefit. And the third thing, which is quite important, is that we discussed a lot about inflammation right at the beginning of our series. The reason why that inflammation continues is through the pro-inflammatory cytokines. So these are these chemicals which enhance and continue the process of inflammation. So one of them is a molecule which is called tumor necrosis factor alpha, or TNF alpha, usually made in the liver. But when we go in the state of fasting, there's a lot of evidence that the levels of these inflammatory or pro-inflammatory cytokines and proteins, they drop dramatically. So we know that actually we are achieving an anti-inflammatory state by fasting. And we also know that with CRP, the C-reactive protein, which is also a marker of inflammation made in the liver, that levels also go down with fasting. So all of this gives evidence that we are getting rid of all the stuff which we have been storing in our hearts perhaps throughout the 11 months of the year. Ramadan gives us the opportunity to do that. And also it gives us the opportunity to bring down the level of inflammation and to keep an anti-inflammatory state.
MashaAllah. Beautifully explained, MashaAllah. Jazakallah. Thank you so much, Dr. Saab. We've got restriction of time. Topic is interesting and we would like to talk more about it. We would like to hear from you. MashaAllah, the information you're providing, I think it's equally benefited for even medical students if they're watching us, and they would revise their notes, MashaAllah, the way you're explaining. And definitely for a layman, for a normal person, you are trying to make it so simple. Jazakallah, thank you very much for coming once again to our show. Many Islamic brothers and viewers of Madani Channel, that's all for today. We'll come back with another beautiful episode in Secrets of Health. Keep watching Madani Channel, keep reciting Salat upon Nabi alayhi salatu wassalam. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
May Allah bless and keep you safe. Keep you safe. May Allah bless and keep you safe.